In the cartoon, The Family Circle, the two children have found their Easter baskets and they're enjoying them. And one of them asked, "Who painted all these eggs?" And the sister replied, "The Easter Bunny." "Who gave us all these jelly beans?" "The Easter Bunny." "And how about the chocolate egg?" "The Easter Bunny." Well, there was nothing beyond the Easter Bunny that anything the Easter Bunny could do. Well, the family went to church for Easter, and the minister said, "The stone was rolled away from the tomb. Who could have done this?" Little boy jumped up from the pew, "The Easter Bunny." So sometimes the meaning of religious holidays can get a little distorted by secular meaning of things. And I believe that the message of Easter and the meaning of Easter can kind of get distorted of what it was really all about. That's what we want to talk about today. What is the real meaning of Easter that we should get from Easter? I believe it's a reassessment of who we are as spiritual beings. It's not about something that this man Jesus did 2,000 years ago only. It's not about some miracle that God performed for Jesus, but rather it's something that happens within us. Let me explain. There was a man looking off over the Grand Canyon, and he was overwhelmed by the wonder and majesty of this incredible place. And he thought aloud, something must have happened here. Indeed, something happened, and it wasn't a Native American many years ago dragging some stick across the ground. Something happened for sure. And with Easter, that first Easter, something happened. That's why we still remember it and celebrate it today. Something happened, but what happened? Did Jesus really resurrect from the dead? I mean, that's scientifically impossible, isn't it? That's unbelievable. How could that happen? Or was it some terrible plot in which his body was stolen so that people would see mystery and so on in this new religion? Well, Christianity would be based on a lie if that were the case. But let's look at it. Perhaps Jesus really did what happened. Perhaps it's true that he appeared after his death, after 3 days, to his disciples and to some 500 other people. Think about it. You probably know someone who has had an experience, or you've heard about people who've had experiences, what they call a near-death experience, where they were physically, clinically pronounced dead, and yet they had an experience that showed there was still consciousness beyond the physical body. And you may know or had the experience yourself where people have seen loved ones who have died, and they've actually seen them alive on the planet after death. I know people like that who have had that experience where they saw a loved one and there wasn't a dream, they weren't asleep, they saw them. Could it be that Jesus, as a spiritual being, left the body and appeared to his disciples and to others, and they saw that essence of who he is? Because I believe that certainly is one of the messages of Easter, is that life is eternal, that we are alive in eternity now. It's not something that happens after death. It's something that we are always alive in, because we're not our bodies. We're spiritual beings. The you that lives in the body, that looks through these eyes, that is consciousness. That is spirit. What the sages and masters tell us is eternal. Because we're not our bodies, we're not our minds, we're not our emotions. We are the spirit. We are a spiritual being having a human experience. And when the body drops, the spirit continues. Perhaps that's what happened with Jesus. He just When the body was dead, he revealed himself as a spirit. That's real possible. According to Dr. Sam Parnia, who has been studying, and he's an expert in resuscitation of cardiac patients, people who have their heart stopped, they're clinically dead, and he spent his life studying the process of how to resuscitate people in this state, as well as what experiences these people report, those who come back from having been clinically dead. Apparently, 10 to 20% of the clinically dead will report that there was still some activity in their brains or in their minds. Those who come back, obviously. 10 to 20%. Wow. Because when the heart stops and you're dead, there's no blood flow to the brain. There shouldn't be, according to scientists, there should be no activity going on. And yet 10 to 20% of people, they report brain activity. So that points to the idea that you are a spiritual being and you go on. I remember reading a report a few years ago in the news, this doctor who had been studying these near-death experiences, and he said there's such a percentage of people who have an experience after their body's clinically been dead that it warrants more scientific research. And so that's very interesting, isn't it? So maybe Jesus just left the body and appeared to people. As a spiritual being, the body doesn't die. The body's just like clothing that we take off, put on. Or who knows, maybe Jesus tapped into a life energy inside, a power inside of him that regenerated the cells of his body. Maybe one day science will understand that process better. After all, don't they say our cells renew themselves completely? Used to be every 7 years. I guess it still is, right? When someone cuts their finger, the cells start to heal. Maybe there's some kind of regenerative process that we don't even know about yet. In fact, Dr. Parnia, in his book, one of his books about death, he says that he tells a story about Joe Tirolosi, who in 2009 had a cardiac arrest in the hospital. His heart stopped. He was clinically dead. There was no oxygen flow to the brain. And fortunately for him, he was taken to the New York Presbyterian Hospital, where there was a trained group on how to resuscitate patients. They were like some of the top experts in the country who were trained in this. So they knew exactly what to do. They, electric shock, they immediately started to inject a cold saline into his veins. They put bags of ice on his body so that the cells wouldn't die in the brain. Well, after 10 minutes of trying to resuscitate him and so on and so forth, in the past, if you go beyond 10 minutes, it's very dangerous. If the person is dead for more than 10 minutes, if they come back, they probably would have had brain damage 10 years ago. You wouldn't want to go that past 10 minutes. They went 47 minutes, the man was dead. And they continued to shock and put stuff in his veins and try to resuscitate him. And he came back after 48 minutes. They got a pulse. And because of all the stuff that they did, then they rushed him to the cardiac unit because something caused him to have this cardiac arrest, to repair the cardiac arrest. And then his heart stopped again. He was clinically dead for another 15 minutes. But they brought him back, they resuscitated him, and because of the most cutting edge science, they were able to make it so that he could come back without any brain damage. And he went back to his wife and kids and was a normal, functioning, happy happy guy. So that's some amazing regeneration that even 10 years ago we wouldn't have thought was possible. So who knows? Maybe Jesus tapped into some kind of higher life energy and knowledge that regenerated his body. Well, the point is, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And that is one of the major messages of Easter, because death, the fear of death, the psychologists have said, is a cause of all kinds of fears that people have in their life. And when you can know, God, I'm a spiritual being, I'm not my body. Now, this fellow Joe, when he came out of, after the surgeries and stuff, they put him in an induced coma for 4 days and had him on a ventilator as his body was healing. And when he came out of it, he had only one memory. He only remembered one thing during that 47, 48 minutes. Now, mind you, when the body's dead, there's no activity in the brain. So how do you have any thought during that period? Well, when he came out, he had an experience with a spiritual being, a presence of love, a presence of that made him feel loved and compassion and warm. And he came out of it without any fear of death at all. He came out of it a changed person. It affected how he was with his family and his work in the world around him. Now, we've heard about those experiences. This is a medically documented experience. This kind of thing has happened so often that it's now kind of accepted that it's not such a strange thing. Well, that's the message of Easter. You're an eternal being. You're a spiritual being. Now, practically speaking, and something that we can apply right now in our life, is that same power that Jesus tapped into to regenerate, and he said, follow me. He said, the works that I do, you can do, and even greater works than these. Follow me. That we can tap into that resurrecting power to provide us and help us in whatever it is that we need. When we're going through a difficult time, when we're going through a challenge, we can tune in to that resurrecting power. That power will help to lift us up, help us to do what we need to do, help us to solve problems, give us the strength, the courage, the motivation, the renewal that we need, lifting up our spirits if need be. A young man, as so often, returned from war, and he had lost his legs. And after he was healed, he wasn't ready to get back out in the world because he was depressed. The idea of not being able to ever walk again. He was totally depressed. All he did in the hospital was just look up at the ceiling. Then one day, another inmate of the hospital walked in. And up to that point, this young man wouldn't listen to anybody. He didn't want anybody's help. He didn't want to hear the doctors, the nurses, how they were trying to help him. He didn't want to talk to anybody. He didn't want to hear anything. All he did was look at the ceiling. This inmate from the hospital walked in, also a veteran. He sat down. He started to play the harmonica quietly. And then he did that for several days. And one of those days he said to the young man, is my playing bothering you? The young man said, no, I kind of like it. And every day he'd talk a little bit more. Then one day the harmonica player was in a sprightly mood and he was playing this uplifting tune. And the young man just sort of looked at him. And the harmonica player said, hey, what's the matter? You know, can't you smile and let a guy know that you're alive? And the young man said, well, if you were in my shoes, you'd sing a different tune. Because I'm dead. And the harmonic player said, well, then you're dead then. But let me just say, if 2,000 years ago, a man could be crucified and then resurrected from the dead, then I suppose same thing could happen for you. Well, that's easy for you to say. You're not in the same fix I am. The harmonica player stood up and said, well, I know it's hard to believe about a resurrection 2,000 years ago, so maybe what we need is a contemporary one. At that point, he reached down and pulled up the pants legs of his trousers, revealing 2 artificial legs. That was the beginning of the resurrection of the spirit of that young man. He went on to live a normal life. He went on to inspire and encourage other people to look at their challenging situations and to resurrect their spirits. It says in the scripture that she looked up and saw that the stone had been rolled away from the tomb. We can look up from our current circumstances. We can look up to that spiritual dimension, that spiritual reality of who we are as spiritual beings, to what's possible in our situation. No matter what challenges we face, no matter who we've been in the past, what mistakes we've made, what challenges there have been in our life, we're always spiritual beings. We're always whole. We're always complete. We're always expressions of spirit. We're always expressions of God's joy and love, and abundance is available to us. Strength is available to us. Courage is available to us. No matter what the challenge is that we face, nothing can change the fact that we're spiritual beings. That is the message of Easter. That is the resurrection that can happen inside of us as we tune into that presence and power. Any one of us can go from the mortal self, the sense of limitation, to the immortal self through prayer. Through prayer. When you tune in to that presence through prayer, what happens to you? You are moving from the sense of limitation and you're looking up. As Jesus said, lift up your eyes and see that the fields are ripe for the harvest. As Abraham was told, lift up your eyes and all that you see I will give you. Lift up your eyes from the appearance and tune in to the presence within you. That's where we find our resurrecting power. That's where we tune in to the peace, the power, the wisdom, the love, the substance, the courage, the renewing activity that lifts us up. When there is casting down, there is lifting up, says Job. And that's true for all of us. Wasn't just true for Jesus. Wasn't something that was just done 2,000 years ago that God did specially for Jesus. It's something that, as he said, the kingdom is within you. The power is within you. The power is within me. That's something that happens within us every single day. You know what a resurrection is? A resurrection is when there's any kind of beneficial change in you and in your inner experience, your inner thoughts, your inner feelings. That's a resurrection. When there's a beneficial shift in your consciousness, you've experienced a resurrection. And we can all experience that. In fact, I believe that we can experience, and we ought to, really, we ought to practice this resurrecting principle every single day. Easter's not just a noun, something we remember from years ago. Easter is a verb. It's an activity. It's something that we've got to engage in every single day to keep our thoughts resurrected, keep our thoughts uplifted, to rise up in our thinking and in our ways of being. That's our daily practice. See, Jesus didn't get to where he was. He didn't just come down like this. He wasn't a special dispensation. He was an example. He was a way shower. I am the way, the truth, and the life. He was showing us the way, and it took practice. It took practice, practice, and practice. It took faith on his part. It says in Hebrews that he was tempted in all ways like all of us, but he didn't give in. You see, he kept at it. He learned mastery. It's like that great performer, Paderewski. He was performing for a family in Europe. And afterwards, a duchess came over and said, "You are a maestro, you're a master." And he said, "Yes, but before I was that, I was a clod." He had to practice and practice and practice to get to where he was. And so did Jesus. And so do you and I. And so I say every day, we need to focus on keeping our thoughts elevated. Let me say something Michael Singer has often talks about, and the author of The Untethered Soul. He often talks about how most people are upset all the time because they're resisting life all the time. They're resisting the present all the time. Why? Why does that happen? Why should we resist life? Why should we resist what's happening? It's because in the past, something brought us pleasure, and so it made us feel good, and so we're trying to make life do that for us now. We're trying to set up life to do those few things that caused us to feel pleasure. And also, things happened in the past where we felt pain. And so we try to live our lives to avoid those things that caused us pain. And the problem is, life rarely conforms to what we want. It's never going to match up to our inner stuff of what we say makes us happy and what causes us pain. Rarely, here and there maybe. So most of the time we're spending it trying to control life, trying to avoid this, trying to make this happen. And that's why we can get so darn right negative. That's why we can become very resisting. And here's what he encourages us to do and what I'm encouraging us to do. Keep our thoughts resurrected. Here's what happens. When things aren't the way we want them to be and we start to feel ourselves resisting, what we can do is relax. Relax. Because when you're relaxing, and as he says, lean away, when you relax and lean away from it, you don't give in to the temptation to let yourself sink into that anger, annoyance, jealousy, envy, anxiety, fear. See, that's the temptation, is to start to get into all of that. Instead, take a deep breath, relax, lean away. In other words, shift your thinking. Focus on something else. Bring your mind back into the present. Do something to shift your energy. Resurrect your thoughts and keep them there. I remember reading Julia Cameron, the author of The Artist's Way. She said that oftentimes she would wake up in the morning and have all this negative thoughts and negative feelings going through her. And that's when she came up with what a lot of people know now is the daily pages. She would start to write for 30 minutes first thing in the morning to get that stuff out of her. And she has encouraged thousands and thousands of students to do the same thing, to write for 30 minutes in the morning. And I thought to myself, wow, she's negative first thing in the morning. And then I started to notice a pattern in myself. I started to notice, well, you're getting kind of negative in the morning sometimes too when you walk in the kitchen and start preparing breakfast. That mind can start going, can start thinking about stuff and start calling up negative emotions. That's why, like Jesus had to do, we've got to practice. We've got to practice and keep practicing. And shift the mind. Why? Why would we want to do that? Here's why. This world is never going to be exactly the way we want it to be all the time. It's not going to match all the stuff we have in ourselves of how it needs to be for us to be happy. That's not how the world is made. Look around you. Do you know anybody who the world lines up exactly for them? Even the people even celebrities or very wealthy people, you think, well, they have everything they want the way they want it. They're still not happy. Few of them are. So that's not going to happen. However, we're spiritual beings. Jesus said, I've come that my joy might be in you and that your joy might be full. In other words, as a spiritual being, you are the joy you're looking for. You are the happiness you're looking for. You're part of it. There's only God. There's one presence and one power in the universe. God is allness, and you're a part of it. If we don't know it, it's because we're looking out there. We're disconnecting ourselves from it by looking out there. The truth is, we're the happiness we're looking for. We're the joy. There's a flow of joy and love and life and wisdom and all good inside of us. But because we got so much stuff going on in here, we don't feel it that often. I mean, we do feel it, but we don't feel as much as we want to. The word for God in the East is Satchidananda, conscious eternal bliss. We long to be in that eternal bliss all the time. Wouldn't that be great? You're just happy, period. That's how children are up until about the age of 5. They're just happy. As long as they got something to eat and something to drink, you know, they're pretty positive, optimistic. And you and I, that's our true nature. We're naturally that way, but we've got all these things. So what do we need to do? We need to when their stuff comes up, relax. Relax. Lean away to it. In other words, choose a positive attitude. Get your mind in an uplifted state. Yeah, well, that's not going to change anything. You can change things from a positive, calm state. You don't have to be negative and upset about it. In fact, you'll make better changes when you're not. In fact, when you get yourself in a positive state, you might find, that's no big deal. Just leave it alone. Let it alone. Or you'll have more wisdom. You'll be more tuned in to actually do something about it that's constructive. You see? But we're addicted to the reactions, to the negativity. It's become a habit. I say, lift yourself up. Choose to be positive no matter what. We've got to be more like that optimistic boy that the psychiatrist was trying to solve. You know that joke? 2 kids, and one of them was very pessimistic and one was very optimistic. They took the kids, they're twins, about 5 or 6 years old, and they took them to a psychiatrist to help balance them out. Well, the psychiatrist took the really pessimistic kid to a room filled with toys. And he said, look, go play. And the little kid started crying. He was like, why are you crying? Little boy said, because if I start playing with these toys, I'm going to break some. Oh my gosh. Well, then he took the optimistic kid and he wanted to balance his optimism out. He took him to a room filled with horse manure. And he was hoping the little kid would, make a nose or whatever. That little kid climbed to the top of the horse manure and with a gleam in his eye started to dig through the horse manure. And the psychiatrist was just as amazed by him as he was the pessimistic kid. He's like, what are you doing? Why are you so happy? Little kid said, well, with all this manure, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere. You see, that doesn't mean we're not going to make changes. It just means we're going to keep our minds elevated, uplifted, resurrected, so that we can tune in to this flow of God inside of us, so that we can stop creating more of these patterns that are stuck in us. Because if we keep reacting to everything, we're storing more patterns that are going to keep on triggering us for the rest of our lives. No, we've got to stop doing that. Doesn't mean we repress. I'm not saying repress. You notice it's there, but then you relax. You relax and you lean away. You shift your consciousness. You shift your attitude. You experience a mini resurrection inside of yourself. And the more often we do that, the more we tune into that divine flow that's inside of us, of joy, of love, of life. In other words, Easter is also personally symbolic. Jesus died to his old self, and he resurrected to something new. He resurrected. This was a personal overcoming for Jesus as well. He was overcoming that last enemy, death. He was demonstrating for himself what was possible, and as a result, he was showing us what was possible for us as well. And so let's take that message of Easter and apply it to ourselves personally and realize no matter what challenges that I may face, there is a presence and an activity flowing and working on my behalf. I can tune into it. I can rely on it. When I take time to pray, the word pray, palal is the Sanskrit word which means for prayer, which means to behold oneself as wondrously made. Prayer is beholding yourself as an expression of God that you are. It's tuning in to the divinity within you. It's looking up beyond the appearances and seeing the potential inside of yourself, where the stone has been rolled away, where there is life, there is love, there is wholeness, there is perfection inside of you. It's, once again, remembering who you are. When I went to college, I remember looking into the mirror and seeing that the spark was gone. I'd been a happy kid most of my life. My parents were good parents. I had a stepfather who was my best friend. I had been a happy kid and a happy teenager until some things happened as a senior in high school, and then in college I started wondering what's the purpose of life, and I went through some social anxiety and stuff with the first romantic relationship I was ever in. I was losing confidence. I was becoming negative. And I really think I must have been depressed. And I started on the spiritual journey, seeking answers. Started meditating. I started doing yoga. And this was back in the days where that stuff was fringe, weird stuff to our society. So it made me feel even stranger that I was doing this. And I was doing all that. And I remember one day that spring, I was at James Madison University in Harrisonburg, Virginia, in the mountains. And I was taking a term paper to be typed. And I was driving through the hillside. And I remember all of a sudden feeling such joy and noticing for the first time that fog, that depression, that anxiety, whatever I had been going through, that had lifted. I felt like that old person had kind of died and something new had been born inside of me. In a sense, a resurrection had taken place. And it was a result of practice. It was a result of prayer. It was a result of meditation. It was a result of changing my thinking. It was a result of keeping on, keeping on. And I believe that no matter what experiences you may be going through, no matter what experiences that you'll ever face, there is a power inside of you that you can rely on. And that was the message of Easter. The message of Easter wasn't just about what happened 2,000 years ago to a man named Jesus. He came to show you and me about that power of God that we have access to, that is inside of you. If you will turn to it, if you will keep your mind centered on it, if you will keep doing the work and making the effort, you will tune into that power. And you will find that just like we did, Jesus was dead, people were sad, people were upset, and then there was dawn. Then there was a resurrection. Then there was a sunrise. And the same is true for whatever situation you face. When you put God first, there will be a resurrection. Thank you, Father, Mother God, for your guidance and direction. Thank you for showing us and helping us to tune in to your resurrecting Spirit. And so it is.